Hey, love bugs. So, in today's story time, I am going to talk about how doing drugs made me a winner. And I know you're thinking, girl, you must be crazy. What is going on with Coach Ladybug today? But once again, we are going to have to wind it all the way back to 1990. I know. It's a good thing we don't look like what we've been through, love bugs, ain't it? So, rewinding it back all the way to 1990, I am still in high school, and I decided that it would be a good idea to pretend I was spending the night at my friend T's house so that we could, of course, sneak out and go to a party with a bunch of guys that were way too old for us to be hanging out with. You know, that cool house in a cool neighborhood, meaning not great, not safe, but it was like a party house. Either parents were absent or there was that one 22-year-old that was living there in the house that allowed any sort of thing to go on. I didn't know all of that. I was a little bit on the sheltered side, and I'll be honest, I was super nerdy. So the thought of going to some exciting party in a questionable neighborhood with older guys just seemed like a really good idea. So I kissed my parents goodbye. I went to my friend's house, and after her parents went to bed, about 10:30, we decided it was time to get dressed, climb out of her window, and catch a ride all the way to this neighborhood, to this party. And the house was like something out of a John Singleton movie. It is not somewhere that we should have been, but the music was bumping and there were all of these well-dressed people in all of the expensive clothes that were a thing back then, the sneakers and the jeans and the airbrushing, all of these exciting things. So we're having a good time. And people are drinking. Wine coolers were a big thing back then. I didn't drink. It was no big deal. We were hanging out, and then we all go inside as it gets later. And now it's after midnight, and everyone is sitting around talking, laughing, music, drinking, and then someone pulls out a joint. Now, I will tell you, Ladybug at this point had already been baptized. I'd committed my life to Christ, so I had no business being at this party in the first place. And even though I had my weaknesses, and even though I wanted to belong, I had a horrible fear of doing any type of drugs. So I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Broward County, if you know, you know. And I saw up close and personal what the drug epidemic had done. And I particularly saw what it did to young women and girls. And I was terrified. And I just had this picture in my head that if I ever do any drugs within 2 weeks, I'll be selling myself on the street. That is what I had in my head. And so to this day, at the ripe old age of 52, I've never even smoked a joint because I've just been terrified. Not because I'm some goody two-shoes. I was just always afraid that it would destroy my life. So we're sitting there, and the traditional puff, puff pass, and I'm so thankful for it because I think it was just God giving me time as this joint was passed around the room. It started to the right. It started on that side of me. So as it was moving around, and I'm sitting there, and it's coming to me. And I had to decide what I was going to do. Here it was at this time, probably close to 2 a.m. I came to the party with someone. My friend and I caught a ride with someone to this party that was very far from her house, which is where I was supposed to be, and far from my house. So what am I going to do? And then I see the young lady that I came to the party with, my friend T. She smokes. And then I see the person that I rode there with smoke. And then it comes to me, what am I going to do? But this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you have to make hard decisions about your life. You know, my husband is a decision coach, and he says hard decisions now keeps you from having to make harder decisions later. And then there was the proverbial hand. And I said, no, thank you. And I just passed it to the next person, thinking that it was going to be okay. And because I didn't know anything about weed culture. It's a big thing now, but you have to think back then it wasn't something that they portrayed on TV in a positive manner. It wasn't heavy in songs like it is now. There was no social media. There were no cell phones. So I just had this image. To me, it might as well have been a couple of lines on a mirror. It didn't make any difference to me. And my answer was no. And once I made that decision, I knew it wasn't going to go over well, but I underestimated how bad it would be. I did not expect the room to kind of explode, not loudly, but everyone in there was in agreement that this was not going to work, that it was not a good idea. What do you mean? I was like, I don't smoke. And I tried to blow it off and bop to the music a little bit. And then I started hearing grumblings. And, I don't curse, but it was like, beep, no, you can't be, who is it? Is this be a narc? What's going on? All of that sort of thing. And apparently it makes you a little paranoid. And so all of these things, and they all decided that I was some kind of enemy, or maybe I was an undercover cop or something like that, because how could I be sitting here and not smoking? And then I hear the owner of the house say, she got to get the beep out of my house. Now, I've seen my friend, she's already smoked. The person that I rode with already smoked. And then there was that moment where they both looked down and neither of them would make eye contact with me. So I knew at that moment I was not catching a ride home with him and that she was not, going to leave with me. And so here it is at 2 a.m. Underage me. I had to get up and leave that house. And now it is pitch black outside. And there are various people roaming the streets, that stray dog. And it highlighted to me just how bad, how unsafe this neighborhood was. I knew that it was, and it had a reputation, but daylight is very different. And I think I went back some years later once I was a driver and I clocked. And I think it was 4 miles back to my neighborhood. And T and I did live in the same neighborhood. And so I had to walk at 2 a.m. I think it was about 4 miles from that neighborhood through bad neighborhood after bad neighborhood. And then I eventually got to a highway, which wasn't any better. Any van could have pulled up and yanked me, and what could I have done? And I had to walk home. And I was terrified. And I couldn't go home because I would have to explain why I was coming home at 2 a.m. when I wasn't where I was supposed to be, because I was supposed to be having a sleepover at T's house. So I had to actually go back to her house, sneak back in the window, go to bed, and wait for her to come back, which I don't know what time it was, maybe around 4 or 5 in the morning, well before the sun came up, so that she wouldn't get busted for sneaking out herself. And I never discussed it with her. But we weren't friends anymore after that for several reasons. And that was a part of it. It was one of many things that were happening. And it just made me realize that this wasn't for me. This wasn't the life that I wanted. It seemed exciting. It seemed fun. And I loved music back then, and I had a huge music collection even at that age. I played instruments, I was in a band, all of those things. So the culture of music and dancing and partying, is very interlaced. And then I ended up in that situation. But on that walk home, I had a mindset shift. You hear me when I talk about love and it's starting with yourself? That was another shift with me. I talked in another video about how a speed bump introduced me to my best friend. And there was a long walk that I ended up on in that video as well. And the Lord has dealt with me many times on a long walk, including this one. But I believe if I could look back through time and see myself taking that very long walk up 441 back home, I think I had a huge smile on my face, because even then I was proud of myself. I was like, wow, did you really get up and walk out? A room full of people cursing and yelling, threatening, peer pressure on 10, and you got up in one of the worst neighborhoods in Broward County and you walked home at 2 a.m. So thankful that God kept me safe. But baby, love is bold. And when you love yourself, you will do what you have to do. And people think that courage is not being afraid. You'll be afraid and you'll do it anyway. I was bold that night. I was courageous that night. And it gave me a winner's heart. It gave me winner type love for myself. And it was one of many times that I stood up for myself, even though your heart is racing, even though you might be sweating, even though you're terrified, even though you don't know what's waiting for you out there, you will still speak up. You will still say no. You will still get up and walk yourself several miles to safety. And that is how doing drugs made me a winner. Being in that room full of followers, full of people willing to do whatever it took to fit in, and watching them do that taught me how to do what I do. So, learn to know more love, show more love, grow more love. It's lovability, and it starts with you. And you are loved, wanted, and needed, or you would not be here. Amen. Amen.